they share a testimony and then pass it off to 3 guys and let them share. Yeah, we'll take as long as you want to. Feel free to embellish or whatever.
Embellish.
Give us all the dirty information.
You mean on Cecil?
Yeah, Cecil. Yeah.
Oh man, I can tell you a few things on Cecil. 1 year in your home's all you need.
Yeah.
Let's get all the dirt.
Cool. Let her rip.
Before I do, I asked you for a t-shirt size, so what you have that from the search ministry?
Great.
That's one of our shirts.
Yeah.
We put the verses on the back because instead of writing the verses out,
nice.
a lot of times people will come up and tap us and say, "What does that verse say?" And it gives us an opening. That's the reason
Awesome.
it does that. So I want
Thanks.
you to have that.
I'll wear this when we play sports. That way they can remember who beat them.
Well, you'll stand out being nice and red.
Yeah.
It's not enough of us here to talk trash. So.
And I'm going to leave these just in case any of the guys or gals think they'd like to pray for us. They you can just have, you don't have to. Anything. You can make a paper plane out of it if you want. But in case they want, yeah, they can have it.
We've got some gifts at the end. I'll pass them out to you guys. They're in the kitchen, but I'll do that at the end based on how well the testimony goes.
We're in trouble. Well, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I grew up with a dad that had a 2nd grade education and a mother that had a 6th grade education. Who made a commitment when they got married that their children would graduate to high school if they had to drag them there. My dad was a hardworking man. My mother was a traditional mother. There were 7 children. And Dad got hurt when I was a little boy, and he would never work again. He was in a body cast for almost 6 months, and life turned upside down. We were destitute. We were poor as dirt. So my aunt and uncle, they had 19 kids living in their home. It was their grandparents, so they moved our family of 9 into their home on a farm. So 32 of us lived in a farm together. There'd be about 5 or 6 of us in a bed, and we took a bath once a week. So my world got turned upside down as a little boy, and I was embarrassed. I went to school, and one time a little girl walked by, and she smelled the perfume. And on that day in elementary, I realized just how dirty I was. So I rebelled. I withdrew. I didn't want to do anything with education. So I got paddled a lot because I would fight the teacher, because I didn't want to get up and have people smell me like I could smell a little girl. So that was the way my elementary went, and I just didn't learn much, which haunts me to this day. I have all kinds of disabilities and deficiencies that makes me feel inferior around most people, even today. So it was in 7th grade, I went into middle school, and I hated to go in there. It was going to be even worse. The middle school kids are pretty cruel. And I had a gym teacher that God probably used to help save my life in one way. He noticed that I was really fast, kind of like my kids. So he got me to come out for football, and that kind of broke me out of my shell. He helped me in the gymnastic team, and eventually become a state champion, and baseball. So all of a sudden, sports became very important to me. And I became very successful as a high school athlete, not necessarily college, but very well known and pictured in the paper a lot. So that was one aspect of my growing up. There was another part of my growing up. I was very religious. My parents were a hard-nosed Catholic. I had a German priest, and he was more hard-nosed than my parents. He would make sometimes correct us, and I remember one time he made me kneel down on prickly concrete and put my hands like this, and I had to stay there for 30 minutes, and I didn't dare move because I'd get in trouble. Well, I found out later I should have just got up and saved myself some pain, because when I got home, my dad just whipped my butt for getting in trouble with the priest. But was real religious, and I became a head altar boy, and I thought maybe I should become a monk, and so I was very religious in that form, but I was still confused because I would pour the wine for the priest every day. I was a head altar boy. I didn't pour wine. I poured Jack Daniels. He drank whiskey. He's supposed to have wine. That was very confusing to me. He would drink beer. He'd do all kinds of other stuff he shouldn't be doing. And so I was very confused about it, but I was still kind of religious. My mom was concerned about me that one time that I was going to go to the world. So she asked me to go to church with her for 90 straight days one summer at 6:30 in the morning. So I went with her for 90 straight days. At the end of the 90 days, I didn't know more God 90 days later than I did the first day I went. I just went with my mom. So that was the other third part of my life. But then I had a secret part of my life. People saw my name in the paper all the time. I was very successful. I was a religious kid. I was head altar boy. People saw that. So people thought I was a good kid. But I had a couple of friends that we used to do things in the night. And I don't believe in big spiritual stripteases, so I'm not going to tell you about all the stuff we did. But the things that we did, if we would have gotten caught, I would have been put into Department of Youth Services. They would have bound us over to adult prison. The sheer amount of destruction and theft that we did at night was incredible. But no one knew it. Only a few of us guys that we ran around at night doing these things. I can't tell you today why we did it outside. We were stupid. That's all I know. But the things we did were wrong. We were also abusive in other areas, but again, because we were highlighted as a head altar boy in sports, no one thought of any things about us, even though we were doing all these ugly things at night. At 19, I went into the Army by mistake, believe it or not. Still can't believe I'm in it. But I went into the Army. I ended up in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and from my basic in AIT. During AIT, I got a weekend pass, and I went down to a place called a coffee house. It was free everything, free food, free games, free everything. Right up my alley. I was really poor, so I liked it. I sat down one day after, while I was there all day, and a guy came up to me and shared Romans 3:23, 6:23, Hebrews 9:27, and Romans 5:8. He asked me two questions: do you believe it? Do you understand? And I said yes to both, and he walks away. Innocent enough. I stayed around, ate some more, played all kinds of games there, da-da-da-da-da. Later on that evening, another young man came by, asked me quoted the same 4 verses, asked me the same 2 questions. I answered yes to both, and he walks away. Nothing else came of that. Later on, I finished there, and then I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. It was January 6, 1975. And outside of these 2 people, the rest of you weren't born yet. So none of you existed. It's kind of interesting thought. What do you think about that? None of these people existed. So, on January 6, 1975, I'm going through one-stop processing. Cecil's working there. He does the educational part. So it doesn't matter if you're a private or if you're an officer, you got to come through him because you got to do your educational folder. At that time, he asked me 2 questions. He said, private period, are you interested in spiritual things? Good Catholic kid? I said, yes. He said, are you interested in a Bible study? I had no clue what he meant by that. Like, none. I just know the word Bible. I didn't know what study meant. But I said yes. He seemed to be okay with that, and he let me go through. During the week, I was in processing for, you run around doing all your stuff. And during that week, there was a knock on my door. Guess who it was? Me. He brings some young man with him. I don't know at that time why he's got some young guy with him. I know now why he did, years later. And he shares those same 4 verses. And he asked me basically the same questions, but he asked me a 3rd question that those 2 boys didn't ask me. He said, would you like to do something about it? And I went, no. Now, I didn't tell him this, but I looked at a 30-year-old guy that had nothing else to do with his life but be bored and talk about Jesus and read a Bible. I was 19 years old, full of spit and vinegar, and engaged to be married, and I wanted to do my thing. And I didn't have time to sit there and be bored about Jesus and whatever he was interested in. But he was okay with that. He was very polite, and the young man, and they left. I finished in processing, and I got my orders. And to my shock, my orders meant I was going to be working right across from him, about 10 feet away for the next 2 years. So when during the 70s, there was a couple of magazines that were very prolific. You may not remember these, I do, because I was kind of keen to them. So during lunch, some of those magazines would come out, except at his desk. At his desk, this is what would come out during lunch. Well, other guys were looking at stuff they shouldn't be looking at, but I didn't care. Until one day he got out of his desk and he walks over to me and says, hey, Private Perry, do you mind if I share with you something God shared with me? I don't know if he remembers that. All I know is this. I was very polite. I didn't really listen to him. I paid attention to him. I don't know what he said. Because in my mind, I'm going, the only person that can understand the Bible is a priest, a pope, a cardinal, but not you. But I didn't say that to him. So he shares whatever he shares, and he goes back to his desk, and life goes on. A couple of days later, he comes back over and does it all over again. I'm going, man, this guy, God didn't talk to you. God talks to the Pope, but not to you. But I kind of blow him off. I don't know at the time if, what he was thinking, obviously, but he introduced me to another 19-year-old boy, raised staunch Catholic. And yet, that young man had been discipled by Tim Woody, which they had in, I think Tim was the second guy in your home, right?
First guy.
First guy. So Joe started spending time with me. As I look back at it, I don't know, it was hardly a day in the next 3 months that Joe Ray did not get with me. If he didn't get with me all 7 days, I know he got with me at least 6. But he did 2 things in 1 Thessalonians 2, 7 and 8. He gave me the Word of God, and he gave me his life. That's what he did. So I could not deny what I saw in Joe Ray as 19, though we had similar backgrounds. He seemed to know God, I knew about him. He seemed to know the Word, I knew about the Word. And on, all that scenario. But he always would share the Word of God with me. He found out my favorite activity. I loved a steak, so he'd take me down to Elizabethtown Steakhouse. I ordered the same steak every time, 20-ounce steak with a baked potato. I don't know how much money Joe Ray went through, but I was going to bankrupt that guy because I love going almost every week, and he would take me. And we would talk, and I remember one day he did something somewhere at the beginning of April. He was going down the road, and he pulled out this little packet. I had no idea what it was. He didn't tell me what it was. He said, "Dave, I'm trying to memorize something. Can you review me?" I said, "Sure." So I'm flipping it over. Guess what verses? Romans 3:23, 6:23, Hebrews 9:27, and all of a sudden Romans 5. I'm just flipping until I get to Romans 5:8, and I stare at it. I don't know how many miles Joe Ray drove that day. All I know is I kept staring at it. And for the first time, I think, in my life, the truth of that verse got in. It would be 2 weeks later, he would take me to a service on campus, I'm coming back to college, on base at Fort Knox to the chapel. And they were showing a movie called Time to Run. It means nothing to you, it means a lot to me. But in that movie, Time to Run, there was a young man who people were trying to reach out to, and they were with him a lot. But he got up one day and he just took off across the country and said, "No, I don't want anything to do with it." They'd been sharing with him, guess what, those same verses. On the way back, he thought, "I need to go home." He picked up some hitchhikers. And then in the movie, and the hitchhikers picked him up, they shared those same verses. They said, "We're going to a Billy Graham crusade. Why don't you come in with us?" He said, "No." But he parks out there. And the loudspeakers go off, and guess what he hears? Same verses. And he realized. And he started to go back, and he goes through that group of believers. And I looked at that and went, that's me. I'm that 19-year-old guy, and I'm running. And on April 14th of 1975, in that little theater in Fort Knox, Kentucky, I surrendered to Jesus. Joe Ray started immediately that night. He says, "Here's Psalms 119, 9, 11. I need you to have these memorized by next week." That was how he started my training. He didn't ask me, he didn't coerce. He didn't ask me if I thought it was a good idea. He said, "I need you to have these memorized by next week." So I thought, okay, that's what let's do. So I memorized Psalm 119, 9, 11. Those were my first 2 verses. He taught me how to have a quiet time. He spent a lot of time. He taught me how to study. He taught me how to share my faith. He taught me about worship. He taught me a lot of things. We went on hours prayer walks on country roads, and he taught me how to talk to my Heavenly Father. So Joe did so much for me. And you know, Cecil, I look back at that, I don't know how a 19-year-old boy figured some of this stuff out at that age, but the things that Tim Woody had done with him stuck at that time. So Tim did a good job with Joe, and Joe did this with me. On the last night that we were together, 1 year later, he was going to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I've never seen Joe Ray in 45 years. From the day he walked out that night, I have never seen him since. But that night, he pulled up, and we went out to dinner one time. He brought me back. We pulled into their driveway. He played a 12-string guitar. I don't know if you remember that. And he sang me a song. That sounds real romantic, doesn't it? But he said something to me. I started to get out of the car. I said, "I need to tell you something." I said, "What?" He says, "I want to tell you this. I have prayed for you every single day since the day I met you, and I've only prayed for you second if I prayed for my parents first." And like the wind just came out of me. So I really believe in that type of prayer, and I have modeled what Joe did for me all these years. So I pray that way. Right after that, Cecil came to me and said, "I'd like you to move into our home for training." I had no idea what he meant by that. I was an early guinea pig, so he made a lot of mistakes on me, so that's probably why I'm so screwed up. No, I'm just kidding. I tell guys all the time that moving into his home years later, he and Jeannie, you're so much better trained than I was, because he was on the front end and he was just trying to figure it out. There was a lot of experiments, and so I'm sure he made a lot of corrections after me, probably maybe 95% corrections after me. But all I know is I never recovered from it. He was working full-time on base. He was married and had a little Rusty Bean as a baby. And that was my experience. I lived in the basement. He thought I shouldn't be alone, so he moved in a guy named Mickey Echo. Do you remember him? Mm-hmm. I about killed Cecil for doing that. We were opposite. I was athletic. That boy didn't want to even throw a frisbee. I mean, I remember I threw it at him one time. He just stood and let it hit him. "What are you doing?" He said, "Let's throw it." "I'm not touching that stuff." I strangled him. So he put the opposite with me, which was really good for me because it really taught me some things. I'm not sure I really like what I learned, but whatever. He still put him with me. So we were together for a while, and then I was ready to leave. And he said, whatever you do when you get to Germany, make sure you hook up with the navigators and so they can help continue on with you. I'll end up in Heidelberg, Germany, at Patton Barracks, and there was no navigator. I called the closest one I could. It was Joe Lee Holt. He was the head of all the navigators Europe-wide, so he was the head of all of them. So I contacted him and said, hey Dave, we're up in Frankfurt. I can get with you once in a while, but we're really busy up here. So I started just reaching out, doing what I needed to do for 2 years, which was not a lot. And all of a sudden, God just started bringing soldiers in. Before I knew it, there was about 30, 35 soldiers that had in a small group Bible study and just meeting with them one-to-one and man-to-man and stuff like that. And a year later, Joe Lee got a hold of me and says, hey, we're moving down. I said, why? He says, I like what's happening down there, so we're going to move down. So he moved to Heidelberg, picked up his family, 3 guys living in his home, and then it got really intense time with Joe Lee Holt, and I needed that guy in my life. There were some things that I had real deficiencies because of my background. I was really screwed up, but I was trying to do what I needed to do. I had a lot of baggage. I had a lot of insecurity. I felt inferior around most people. And as time went along, he said, Dave, I think you need to get out of the military. I think you need to be in civilian life. I don't think you're meant to be in this. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have the skill to go out there. He said, you need to go to college. I said, not this guy. Not this guy. If it wasn't for 2s and 1s, I wouldn't have had a GPA in high school. And if it wasn't for girls, I wouldn't have had that because they cheated and did most of my tests. So, I mean, one time I went to my Spanish teacher, and first day of class, on the first day, and I said, Miss Wilson, can I go down on gymnastics? She said, is it okay with him? I went, yeah, I guess. I don't know what she meant by that. So she wrote me a pass, 9th period, and I went down to the gym and I worked out because I was a gymnast. So I came back the next day and I said, Miss Wilson, can we go down to gymnastics? She said, are you sure it's okay with him? I went, I know what she means. She thinks Mr. Nastics, Mr. Gymnastics was a teacher. This woman was senile. She shouldn't have been. She should retire with the dinosaurs. But she wrote me a pass, so I went to work out in the gym every 9th period. And I only came back because she only gave tests, she didn't give homework. So when she gave tests, I was always in class. But I always sat right in front of her desk because she always put the key there. So I'd take the key off, write all the answers, put the key back, and I got straight A's in Spanish because it was always a better search key. And the rest of the time, I just stayed out of her class. I used to throw sometimes a pencil out the window, said Mrs. Wilson. She said, what do you want, Mr. Perry? I said, I'd like to go find my pencil. Where's your pencil, Mr. Perry? I said, it's outside. She said, what? Okay. And I'd be gone the whole period, just running around doing crazy stuff. And then if I'd come in just before the bell would ring, she said, Mr. Perry, where have you been? I said, Miss Wilson, do you know how hard it is to find a green pencil in green grass? It's pretty tough. Okay. Just don't do it again. Okay, fine. So this is how I kind of lived life. I was really bad in school. So Joe Lee had to help me for a year. And I remember one day he came up to me about a year before I got out of the military, and he did this. He said, you're struggling immensely, aren't you? I went, like you wouldn't believe. He said, I want to help you. It's okay. So he did. So I applied to 8 colleges in the state of Ohio. 7 of them reinforced everything I knew about myself. 7 of them turned me down. I got 7 rejection letters. 1 of them said yes, it was Ron Green. Then I found out later to reinforce me anyway because they have an open policy that you cannot turn down a student. They have no standard. Yeah, it was really bad. My story's really bad. It's ugly. So that's right. You're a senior there now.
Almost the same.
So on September 9th of 1979, I walked on campus. And it's the middle of nowhere. It really is. If you look on a map, all you see is trees. So it's really bad. So I was walking on campus, and I walked on the side of a hill, and I looked over a valley, and it's Bob Evans' farm. It's 1,000 acres. And I thought, this is really cool. I didn't know it was Bob Evans' farm. I didn't know what I was looking at. I just thought it was kind of cool. And I'm sitting on this hill beside a flagpole on a great big rock, and I turned to my left, and I saw the campus. On September 9th of 1979, I got down on my knees on that rock, and I prayed for the students and staff of Ron Green. And I prayed all night. I walked around that campus all night, circling dorms, circling buildings, circling the campus, circling the buildings. And I asked God that night for 2 things. I asked that you give me a man that I can invest my life into on a consistent basis. And the second thing I asked is you would help me figure out where a man was and take him where he needs to be, which is Jesus, in a short amount of time. God's honored those prayers ever since. So we stayed there. I met my wife there, Sandy, and she didn't like me. I didn't like her. She was a cheerleader. That was really against her, and she worked on Sunday, and she thought I was arrogant. That part was right. That was really right. I was real arrogant. And God had to do a lot of things with me. For someone who's so insecure, I went the opposite end in some areas. It was really bad. But one day I saw her in church, and I told God, I said, I'm going to marry her. It's probably not the best way of doing that, but it's maybe a little better than yours. But so I left church. She got ahead of me, and she was almost to the door, and I literally ran. It's about a half a mile. I ran and caught her just as she got her hand on the door. And I said, hey, would you like to go to lunch today? Yeah, I guess. Sure. See, it was God divine because her parents were down the same day and her brother because it was Sandy's birthday. So I got to meet mom, dad, and brother. I got to meet the family. It was really cool. So we began to see one another, and Sandy really didn't know a whole lot. And so helped her get to know who Jesus was more, even though she was a Christian, and she began to really grow, and God developed our relationship. So we got married, and she graduated for me because I was in the Army for 5 years. She took a job 45 minutes away. I was doing my student teaching, so I got student teaching 45 minutes away. So I said, logic, I know he talks about the same about being logical. Logical thing is that we pack up our bags and we leave, even though God was doing all kinds of things on campus. But we left, and for 9 months, God wouldn't do anything with us. And I went to Sandy one day, I said, we're going back to Rio Grande. Why are we going back? Because we're out of the will of God. We did not ask God. We did not confer with God, not one bit. We got up because you had a job and I was doing teaching, and we didn't want to drive 45 miles. She said, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to go back now. We're going to find us a place to live. I went back on campus that very night. Went to an apartment complex that was being built. 3 apartments. They weren't even finished. I went to the guy and said, I want to rent the first one. He says, I'm still putting it together. I said, I don't care. I'll pay you. Let me move into that. He said, you don't understand. I'm still putting things in it. I said, I understand that. Let me live in it, and you work around us. Okay, I think you're crazy. I said, fine, but will you rent this to me? He said, yes, as long as you know, I got to still do work in it. I said, fine, it's okay. So I went and got Sandy. We packed up, and we moved from a 2-story gigantic home. It was beautiful, into this little tiny 200 and some square feet apartment. So we started there, and we began to reach out on campus, and God began to give us guys and gals that we could invest into as we were working around that little apartment. Shortly after that, we moved into the house 50 feet away from it. It's about a 600 and some square foot house. We moved in there, moved into our first guy into our home, Don Schutte, first guy I led to Christ, and moved into our home for a year for training. We stayed there for a while doing the same thing. We'd stuff that little apartment with sometimes 30 people or more. Just get them in there, and we were meeting with them on campus, the community. We moved out of there to the house beside it, which is about 30 feet, and moved in the next house. And we lived there for 11 years and had people live with us, but we told them if to live with us, you have to live with the condition in the basement. There's a half basement. I wouldn't have lived in it. I'm not sure I would have put a monkey in there, but they were willing to. And because if it rained, it would back up. You always had 4 to 6 inches of water in the basement every time it rained. So I always told the kids, I said, whatever you do, don't put your socks down there, don't put anything to your value, don't put your books, you're gonna lose them all. And I had to put a fake wall. It was still a little bit base. I put a fake wall in, which they had privacy. I put a towel up there, and they were in there where the hot water tank was. They were where the furnace was. They were all kinds of wires. I mean, it was sick. But they would come in there and live with us for training that way. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I called an insurance company one day, and I said, I'm going to burn my house down. I said, Mr. Perry, don't tell us that. I said, well, I am going to tell you that. I just did. I'm going to burn my house down. He said, you can't do that. I said, well, I already did tell you that. So I am. Why are you doing that? I said, because it's falling down. So I'm going to burn it. I'm going to call the fire department and have you come burn the thing. Well, you really shouldn't have told us. Well, it's kind of a moot point, so I'm going to do it. So we burned the house down. We built the house that we have now. And we've had guys and gals living there ever since. So it's kind of a weird way of approaching things. But I've been a teacher for 17 years, and I was an administrator for 18 years. So I have worked full time and yet did full-time ministry. I've had 2 kids that were highly athletic. My kids are all Americans. They're state champions. My daughter was 6-time state runner-up, 4 times, 3 straight times in a 400. My son's an All-American, has records all over the place. So we ran around like crazy people with our kids. And so people said, well, how'd you do ministry when they were going that way? I said, I took guys with us. I said, this is life, this is real. So if I'm gonna be with my kids, you need to go with me. And when we had the little kids, I said, if you need to be with Sandy, you need to come over because she can't take the kids with you, so you come to the house. So the girls would come to the house, the guys would come to the house. Our kids don't know anything different than a revolving door of people in our life. And yet we had full-time jobs. We've had, I don't know, 60, 70 people live in our home. They're in their 38 years of marriage. So I just don't know how to live life any differently. About 10 or 12 years ago or so, Cecil comes up each year to speak with us. And we usually take a walk. I like taking those walks with him. One day we were taking a walk on Bob Evans' farm, and he says, I need to ask you a question. I said, what's that? He says, this is the thing with you. Now, if you know Cecil, he knows how to ask real good questions. It's probably the worst question he ever asked in 45 years I've known him. Because I had no idea what he meant by that. So I said, what do you mean? He said, the thing, this is a calling. He said, the thing with you. I said, I don't get it. He said, here, why are you here? You could have been doing this full time anywhere. And you've stayed here working full time, and you could have had more free time and been whatever. I said, well, do you really want to know? He said, yeah, I want to know. I said, it's your fault. He said, how's my fault? I said, when I came through Fort Knox, you had a full-time job, married, lived in the community, had a little kid, and had a dog, and God was trusting you with men. I said, you were the model. You were the model. Jim Webster was the other model. Jim was very full-time. So I saw both. I just saw value in this. I believe that 99% of the body of Christ will never go full-time. I believe 99% of the body is going to live out in community. The problem is the 99% feel inadequate to do this because they don't see it done. They see full-time. So unless they see full-time, they don't know how to do it. And if you go to your brick and mortar church, I don't want to be too critical here, but what they see is that guy up there, and you're almost second-class Christian. You can't do what he does. You don't have the knowledge that he has. You don't have the experience. You don't have the tools. So people basically sit and do programs, but they don't get involved with nice people. So I looked at it going, they need a model for this. And I think God called me to be a model to do that. So do I appreciate the full-time people? Yes. I do, greatly, immensely. However, I also think there needs to be tent makers, and I believe it can be done. And over the years, guys and gals have come through, and many of them that have come through have continued on. And, so I think it can be done. Now, is there a cost to it? You bet there's a cost. There's a cost just like this couple does. That couple did. You give up privacy. People wear out your carpet. They spill things on your sofas and they ruin them. But you got to remember that people are more important than your sofa and your carpet. They're always more important. There's a certain amount of time that you would have with your kids that your kids want. There's a certain amount of cost in that. There's the privacy. I built my home this last time. I built it in such a way that my wife would have a sanctuary. I built it that way on purpose. I told Sandy, I said, if we're going to continue this, you're going to have a sanctuary. And I tell guys all the time, there's an invisible wall here. When you come to this bathroom, there's about another foot of the wall. It stops at the frame of the bathroom. Don't cross that invisible wall. If my wife wants to walk back through that bedroom naked, you better not go around that wall. So guys know that. That's her sanctuary. If she just wants to get away, that's her sanctuary. Our kids' bedrooms were built into, if the guys live with us, they live in the basement. The gals live with us, they live in the basement. They've always lived in the basement. Even with the flooding, they lived in the basement. I made sure that my family had a sanctuary. At the same time, they were constantly exposed to them and other common areas of the home. But my kids and my wife always knew there was a place of refuge for them. So I guarded that very heavily. At the same time, that common areas was wide open, and my kids loved it. My daughter says she cannot imagine living life any differently. She just thought this was life for God's people until she got out and found out it wasn't. So that's what we've been doing, and God has answered the 2 prayers that I asked from the beginning, all these years. I stay connected with Cecil over 45 years. I don't need Cecil being in Rio Grande. I believe on God's man in Rio Grande. That sounds real arrogant. But it's Ezekiel 22:30. When I came to Rio Grande, I asked God, he would never be able to say the last phrase in Ezekiel 22:30. When God is searching for a man to stand between him and the gap, between him and the land, but he says that frightful phrase, and I found no one. When I came there in September 1979, I told God, I hope you never be able to say that about Rio Grande. However, I've wanted to stay attached, tied to, as a friendship, a co-laborer, a friend, a counselor for 45 years. I value his insight. I value his counsel. I don't have to do what he says, but I'll tell you what, I'm going to take a hard look at every time he says something to me. Even if it's a passing conversation, I value his counsel that much, that I will do that. I have not always done what he said, probably to his disappointment on sometimes. Now, I'm going to tell the story on him, and he'll deny it. He'll deny this vehemently. But my wife will back me to the hill on this one. He wrote me a letter one time. I have that letter. I'm going to find that letter so I can prove it to him. But my wife is my witness, so I don't really care if I find it or not. He wrote me a letter and said this in the letter after he showed a few things. He said, it is, quote, it is the will of God that you come to Austin Peay. It is the will of God. That's what it says in the letter. And he said no, and then he jumped right in front of him and said, yes, it is, see, so I read it. So I am glad she read the letter. So as strong as he was about it, as much as I respected what he had to say, I believe God wanted me in Rio Grande. So I had to stay there. But did I maul over it? You bet I did. There was a time in our marriage, I'm backtracking, I'm sorry about that. My mind kind of wanders on some of this. But there was a time early in our marriage, I would come down and hook up with Cecil and Jim Webster. And I'd come back and I'd be different. Then that would kind of pan out about a month or so and I'd be okay. Then next year or 6 months or whatever, I'd come down again to a conference or just get with them. I'd come back and I'd be different. And one day, Sandy called me on the carpet and she said, this has got to stop. I said, what? You're this way here, you go down there, and every time you go down and you come back, you feel absolutely whipped, worn out, and worthless. And it's got to stop. Either you stop going, or something's got to change. And it's like God took a dagger and stuck it right in my heart. And she was right. Because what I was doing is I thought I had to be exactly and produce exactly what he was producing. And that wasn't true. And I settled it. I settled that with God. The principles don't change. They don't change. Truth doesn't change. What God is doing doesn't change. And when I settled that in my heart and my mind, I was okay. That it wasn't going to be exactly like at Fort Knox, or exactly like at Fort Campbell, exactly like Fort Bragg. And I was okay with that. And then maybe I wasn't going to have this 150 people that you have around here. Or down there at Fort Campbell, it was as prolific as could be when he was there. But that was okay. It was okay. Jim Webster and Rachel helped me one time. Love him to death. I miss him so much. I get spit nails. I miss him so much. If I'm not careful, I'm getting myself in trouble here. Where do you hear him? They were up there one time, and I said something, and it wasn't Jim, it was Rachel. She stopped me dead in my tracks. She said, Dave, I haven't heard you talk that way in a while. I'm not sure why that's coming out. You really need to think that way. The guys and gals in here, they love you. They love you and Sandy. And you need to really let that go. I went, yeah, she's right. I don't know why a guy had gotten back in, but it had, after all those years. There are 3 main men in my life outside of my dad. Jim Webster. There's one saying from Jim Webster I hold to this day. Cecil has all kinds of quotes. I have several of them. He has more than I do. This is my favorite one. I asked Jim Webster what his thoughts about the Word of God was. I've never forgotten it. He looked at me and says, God said it good enough. I tell you what, that is absolutely burned in my mind. God said it good enough. I just believe God. I do. Isaiah 14:27 says, for the Lord of hosts has planned, who can frustrate it, and as far as his outstretched hand, who can turn it back? They're rhetorical questions. Nobody. Nobody. God's going to do what he wants to do with or without us. It's just better for us to be on his team. So when Jim Webster said, God said it good enough, it's good enough for me. Joe Lee Holt helped me with lordship. One of the biggest things he helped me was with lordship. And he had a phrase. He said, lordship is like marriage. It's one big I do and a whole lot of uh-huhs. I went, man, that was really good. I like that. Because it is. And if any of you that are married, you know that. You do one big I do for the rest of your marriage. It's a whole lot of uh-huhs. There was a commitment made. You drew a line in the sand. All of us did. Said, I'm going for broke. But every day by day, minute by minute, moment by moment, there's uh-huhs. That's the way lordship was. Boy, that really helped me understand lordship. But probably the greatest phrase came from Cecil, not the three guys, the other two, but it was his. And it was only 2 words. One day he said, read Jesus. Boy, that's seared in my mind. Read Jesus. It wasn't complicated. See, I don't hold a candle the way he can explain things. And I had to let go of that because there were so many years I went through that going, I'm not like him. I'll never be like him. And then God finally said, you're right. You're never going to be like him. I geared him up a certain way. He's different than most guys. So appreciate, and I do. See, I look at Hebrews 13, 7 and 17, and I can appreciate him who gave the word of God to me. And I appreciate him like you wouldn't believe. I've told guys before that he and I are also not the same on this one. Sometimes he gets on me about being emotional. Matter of fact, he's got on me about being emotional most of my life, in our 45 years. It's because he's so opposite in that, even though he's gotten better. I'll tell you the story. I like telling on you sometimes. I remember years ago when
That's what we asked for.
when I came down to Webster to Fort Knox, Cecil's always been. How are you doing? So I came down one year, and I had to stand to do this. I don't know if I can demonstrate this. I went to go do what I normally do for years. I've known him. I went to go, and he puts his hand around, and he hugs me, and my hands are like this. I'm going, what's this about? And he leans forward and goes, Rusty says I need to do some more of this. I don't get anything out of it. I didn't get anything out of it. But see, the thing is, if everything being equal and him being older than me, unless something happens, I can tell you, as you're sitting here, God is my witness. If he goes before I do, there will be a great wailing. Just wail, God, I love him. I love Cecil Bean. I love Jeannie Bean. She is one of the distinct women I pray for, qualities that I saw in Jeannie's life. And I lived with her for 1 year. That I prayed, I begged God to have in my life. And I can tell you some of the qualities of Jeannie Bean are absolutely etched in my life. She's just like her. I love Jeannie Bean. And I think they're a great couple. And they mean the world to me. I am where I am today a lot because of this couple here. And I am so grateful for their 45-year friendship and co-laboring together. Many of you sitting in this room, if you want to accept it or not, many of you will not have this in your lifetime. Only the few of you are going to last in this. Even those who are here, there are a number of you who are going to bail out somewhere along the way. Just don't know who it is. Never know who it is. Don't know who's going to make it. We would hope that all of you will, but that's just not going to happen. It didn't happen in the life of Jesus. It's not going to happen here. But for you that do, you hope over decades you have these type of relationships. They will serve you well. They will. And they do to me. So that's not my story, and I stand by. It's probably not really good. I'm not good at this stuff. I'm really not. All my insecurities roll out even at 64. They just spilled out of me. So I'm not really good at this stuff. He's really good at it. He can sit here and he's captivating, and you can listen to him, and you want to ask him because he's so genuine. He wants to be able to communicate more effectively, but I think he communicates more effectively than any man I know. So that's my story. We can ask questions later, but I'd like the guys to give a 2-minute testimony, because these guys are not military. They're work guys. And yet I believe that God does this. So go ahead, Josh.
So, my name's Josh. I am an SSA for the Jackson County Board of Developmental Disabilities. Growing up, I believed in Jesus, but I did not have any clue how to serve him. And I was extremely frustrated with my faith in my early 20s, and I was ready to give up on my faith altogether. But I started going to a Bible study that Evan's staff led, who he was trained by Cecil. And one night I went to a rally that Cecil was at, and afterward, Evan and I had a conversation where Evan showed me that I was not where I needed to be in my faith, but he was willing to help me get there. And so I started getting time with him, as much time as I possibly could, and he helped me get established in the faith. He moved me into his home and showed me to have a commitment to obedience as well as a focus on discipleship. Eventually he moved to Mobile, Alabama, and I decided to continue my training in Rio Grande, Ohio with his father-in-law, David. I have moved into Dave's home, and he has really helped me in many ways have more of a generational focus. He's helped to equip me in the faith. And I think one of the biggest things is to have a little bit of a different approach to guys. For a long time, or as long as I've been doing this, which isn't a very long time, I have been extremely direct, a little overbearing on guys, I think, and I have not allowed them the opportunity to personally discover the truth. Rather, what he's been teaching me, and I'm trying to learn actively right now, is to help guys by walking alongside of them and help them develop convictions about who Jesus is and how to serve him. And so I've also grown a lot in my prayer life around him, and as well as discipline, as he gets up like at 4 a.m. every single morning to pray for like an hour and a half. I have definitely grown in that area, and now I have a commitment to the next 7 to 10 years in Rio around Dave, to training and to becoming more effective as a follower of Jesus, so that I can be effective in the Great Commission. That's my testimony.
So, my name is Silas Machado. I'm a student athlete in the University of Rio Grande, the no standard university that Dave said. It's kind of true, but they don't expect you to learn to know English to go there, as you can see. So I was born in Brazil, raised in the Catholic Church. When I was 12 years old, I moved away from home to play soccer, and one of the guys there called Vanderlei, he was older, he was already in the professional team, and he shared the gospel with me and encouraged me to read in Matthew, start in Matthew, and I did. Moved to another team and started a Bible study there, just as I saw in this other team, and didn't know what I was doing, to be honest, but God worked in spite of me. Got injured, my contract was over in Brazil, wasn't playing anymore, but then came to America to study and play. And my first month in Rio, it was pretty tough. I wasn't learning English, and I wasn't in the Word anymore. I wasn't praying anymore. The two things that I knew I should be doing, was convinced. And then 3 guys knocked on my door. It was Dave, Cody, and Nick Carty. Then asked me if I was interested in spiritual things. So I start hanging around them, and unfortunately, and I saw those guys, talking about quiet times and studying their Bible and quoting scriptures, and on, and I start catching those things more than what they were teaching me, and just start doing those things too, and being convinced. More specifically, spend more time with Nick Carty. That after a year, he invited me to come to his home and to live with him. So he opened his door, and now I could see how a godly man have a wife, deals with a wife, with a kid, with a job, and follow Jesus in the midst of all of it, and try to raise men and invest in people's life in the midst of life. And that's been great for me to be able to watch someone doing that in front of me, not only telling me what to do, but demonstrating and modeling to me those things. So I think a few guys my age can have this opportunity. As a result of that, I'm also trying to reach out to others, do the same that's being done to me, the things that I know, and in this process, trying to become more like Jesus, and figure out Jesus, what he did, and what I'm supposed to do.
All right, before my 2 minutes starts, I want to preface with a couple verses. 2 Corinthians 13:5 says, I will most gladly spend and be spent for your souls. If I love you more, might to be loved less. And John 15:13, greater love has no man than this, and that he laid down his life for his friends. So keep those verses in mind while I share my story, and I'll try not to cry.
Too late.
He's not very emotional, that's one of the things.
So I'm Jacob Patterson. I grew up in Southern Ohio, not in Georgia, like I sound like. I'm the second of 6 kids. My parents are first-generation Christians. They really did a good job showing me right from wrong. They did what they knew to do with all my brothers and sisters. I was a pretty good kid relative to others, but when I got out on my own, I did a lot of what Isaiah 53:6 says, and I went my own way. I lived that way for 4 or 5 years. It was a lot of pleasure, a lot of self-glory. But when I was 22, in 2014, this guy approached me at work and was asking me some really tough questions about my worldview. Said I was a Christian, although I had made a profession of faith. I was not regenerate, and I just didn't know. So this guy helped me to get in the Word for myself. We got lunch every day together, spent an immense amount of time at lunch, hundreds of hours at work. And then after that, he helped me get a job in working with him. So we had like 5-6 hours a day together. We pray together, review scripture every day, talk about the Word, what we were studying every day. And he really spent himself for me. Pause that time. So after a few years, I realized that I wanted more. I needed more. And I was actually at the Toccoa Navigators Conference, and I texted him and told him I was going to move into his basement and see what he thought. And he texted me back 1 Thessalonians 2:7 and 8. So he felt the same way that I felt about him. So I moved in. I lived there for 10 months. He and Molly, his wife, invited me into nearly every facet of their life that they could, every single thing, and continued to lay down their life for me. So after 10 months, I moved out, and there's a guy that God has given me for this time in my life that is now, there's tangible evidence in his life that God's working in his heart. His name's Ethan. So Ethan lives in an apartment with me for the same reasons, to turn around and trying to impart what has been imparted to me, and with a hyper focus on Jesus. And that's the same way. We were asked to share about 2 people, and I would say Dave is the second guy that has had a lot of direct impact, but also indirect through the men that he's invested in through the years. So that's my story, kind of where I am now, and my future is looking really good, but there's a lot up in the air right now, and praise the Lord for where things are.
So it's 11 o'clock, we got about 30 minutes, so if you have questions about Dave's story or any of these guys' stories, or just how things are going or set up at Rio, now's the time to ask.
Coffee.
David, it sounds like you asked the same question that Cecil asked you. Are you interested in spiritual things? Is that kind of the question that you've latched onto when you approach guys? It sounds like the question you asked Silas when you knocked on his door.
I do. My two favorite questions is the one he started with me. See, I don't, remember I have all kinds of insecurities, so I latch on to things and don't let go. The other one is out of Hebrews 3:1. It says, consider Christ. So my other question is, are you willing to consider the claims of Christ? If the only other variation of that one is I ask people, have you ever considered the claims of Christ? Regardless if they yes or no, people say you shouldn't ask questions that are yes or no because they're dead end. It doesn't matter if they answer yes or no. I already know where I'm going with either way they answer. So, but I like asking those two questions. So, yeah. And then that one.
It's funny you said that because I found out that here works pretty well. But whoever's from Brazil, me coming from Brazil, when you say spiritual things, it can mean anything. So we have a lot of mystics, religions there, voodoo and all those type of things. And here in America, is not, people don't talk too much, but if you go there, you see, it's just openly. So I was kind of like, depends what spiritual thing you're talking about. But I'm very happy that God, He works in spite of any question that we do.
Yeah.
So.
And we didn't know that until later when he told us when we asked about spiritual things. That kind of freaked him out. When voodoos. I would have liked to have my little voodoo doll though.
Dave, it sounds like once you got to Rio and you've been there the last several decades, you didn't have anybody at Rio still continuing to invest in you or train you.
Yeah.
You kind of had what you had.
Yeah.
But it does sound like, is it true that you stay connected to Cecil every year in some way? Yeah. Sometimes a year.
Hit 3 guys. Cecil Bean, Jim Webster, Jolie Holt.
And you stayed connected with those guys
All 3 of them.
throughout the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until each one of them died off.
Yeah. And you either go visit them, FaceTime.
Yeah, they come back up. Oh no, they want FaceTime. Barely computers.
You go visit them, they visit you,
Yeah.
talk on the phone.
Yeah, bring them up. Cecil would always be up. Jolie Holt would be up and speak to the game. Jim Webster and Rachel would always be up. That would be almost annually. We take guys down to them, so it was a two-way street all the time. And then, but I stayed in contact with Cecil more than the other two.
Do you think, so it's not meant to be a leading question, but I was going to ask kind of a separate question, but I would imagine it's connected. Like, how did you stay encouraged? Were there times that you got really discouraged about how things were going at Rio, or felt like, this isn't working, I want to quit? What happened in those times? What got you through that?
There are several actually. I remember when he, just before I left, he sat me down and he said, I have a couple observations about you. I said, what's that? He says, I think I know what might take you out. I think it's interesting, someone thinks they kind of knew that kind of stuff. So I didn't know about how he figured that out. But as I look back over the now 45 years, he's pretty accurate on what his observations were at the time. And I've had to weather some of those. But I think 2 things. One is staying in the Word. I know that sounds trite, but it was staying in the Word. And my prayer life extended more during those times. So even though I like to go out each morning and pray for an hour and a half, those times would be 4, 5, 6. I get lost when I go out and pray. So those were probably the 2 big things. Then the third one is not to be taken lightly. Is I've always asked God to have men around me that were unshakable. It's 2 Kings 2. It's the
We call it second king of the
yeah. But it's also Ruth. Ruth is the unshakable woman. She tells her, wherever you're going, I'm going to be with your God. So she's the unshakable woman. I wanted to have couples after Priscilla and Aquila. I think they're the unshakable couple. So I think that God honored prayers. I would pray for those things. So during those rough times, those people were still there, and I needed those people. It's Ecclesiastes 4:9-10. Woe to the one who's alone when he falls, and not another lift him up. It was those type of things. So it's being in the Word, even though it may sound as trite as it is, my prayer life would extend more because I needed to spend time alone with my Heavenly Father. I'm real big that my Father wants me to spend time with Him, and He wants me to know Him, but He wants me also to know His Son. When He quoted that one verse out of Matthew 3, where God said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." God's pleased with Jesus. The Father is pleased with His Son. And I want to learn how to be pleased. And I talk to guys all the time about this. They need to learn how to be pleased with what God's pleased with. The number one thing God's pleased with is with His Son. See, there is no greater pleasure, I think, that God has than His Son. So the emphasis has to be Jesus. If we miss Jesus, we miss it. We can learn all the methods and tools we want, but if we miss Jesus, we miss it. So during those times, it'll be the Word, prayer, and having those type of people around me. And I covet the prayers of people. I know when people have died off that have been my back door prayer people. I know people don't think this, but I can feel when those people die off. I've over the years, I have people that will pray consistently for students. They're not the front, they're the baggage carriers. That's what they are.
Yeah.
But I've had students literally come up to me and say, "I know you've sicked those people on me." What do you mean? "You've got them praying for me in this area, don't you?" I said, "Yep, you bet. I sure do." And they know it. And that's how fervent these people. So I covet prayer warriors. And they may not be the fronter. They may not be out there shooting the bow. And me and Daniel getting down and dirty with students and the people in the community. But boy, they're back here. They are absolutely ferocious. And I sick God on them. I do.
How many people were how many students in Rio?
The peak was 3,300. It's a small college, and right now it's less than 1,200 because we got in financial hard times.
How many in the city?
There is in the city. It's a village.
Village. How many in the village?
Less than 600. See, you guys would think that's crazy to go live in a place where I live. So.
But for 40 years, God's been raising up people.
Yeah, I just was in contact with one of our guys. He's down in Peru right now. He's doing a real good job down in Peru. I was just in contact with one of the guys. He's in Tokyo. I just was with him last week, talked with him. And there's just students that come through. There's guys in Nigeria. There's a guy that's in Ireland. He's a real good guy. He was on the first national championship team of the soccer that he plays on. Tony Griffith, he's in Ireland. He's doing a real good job over there. They're just all over the place. I'm going to go into all that kind of stuff. It's not that important. But no, they're just all over. So I try to stay in contact. I have a very broad base of people I stay in touch with. So it's not just contact here. I try to stay in contact with guys throughout the years and gals and figure out where they are. I was telling the guys in the 41 years that we've been doing this, there's only been, and there's been a lot of people get married out of our ministry. There's only been one divorce in 41 years out of all the couples that have come to our ministry. So I think they had a good foundation of what they're supposed to be doing. So it's paid off in marriages.
What are some other trends you've seen of folks leaving the area and going other locations?
We'll do different things, and I'm okay with that. If you remember, Cecil said he's gotten less critical of the church, and I agree. If they're working in the body, and Jesus made it very plain, they're not against us or for us. I appreciate what other students, as they have left, and their contribution to the body. I'm not big on someone becoming a pastor. I'll just be honest with you. Be it, I know that 8 guys that have come out of our ministry that are pastors, and I'm okay with that. They're working in the harvest. So others do a lot of different other things in the body, and I'm okay with that. I just know that when I was in Germany, a Messianic Jew really helped me in my Christian life. Joe Lee Holden and Stuart Rothberg were the 2 big ones. And Stuart had a bunch of his key guys. Joe Lee actually turned him over to Stuart. We were together and really moving along, high powered, just running, turned the world upside down. And he invited this guy named Steve to the group. This guy was about to leave. He had met him. He brought him over. And he set us up. Stuart, I could strangle him. But he set us up. He went around and says, okay, what's your vision? Discipleship, multiplication. Next guy. Everybody all the way. And then it came to Steve. Steve's over here loose as a goose. Yeah, man, I can't wait. I'm going to get out and I'm going to go buy me a van. I'm going to tear it all apart. I'm going to put carpet and big speakers and I'm going to play Jesus music, go in the park with a bunch of kids there and share Jesus, lead all kinds of people to Christ. And we're all going, yeah. And so, being arrogant, I had a few things to say. A couple other people had some things to say. He left, happy as a lark. Stuart turned around and absolutely ripped our butts. He said, I dare you. What if God has called him to do exactly what he does? What if he goes back to America and for the next several decades he does exactly what he does, thousands of people come to know Christ, and somewhere along the line you meet one of these people and they say, hey, I came to know Christ, this crazy nut was down here playing this music, and you get to disciple that person and he turns out to be a laborer. It's like he took another dagger. See, I had to take a lot of daggers. That's a hard learner. So I went, okay. So after that, I was done. So I want to appreciate what the bounty's doing. And I had to learn a hard way. So.
Dave, what are some of the, and you guys also, what are some of the principles that you've taken from the Campbell, the Knox, the Germany, and implemented in Rio where it's a little bit smaller of a community?
Throw them all out. They don't work. Sorry I had to say that. That was way too tempting.
Glad I can make your day.
There are certain things that don't change. They just don't. It's the emphasis on the word. We get involved with a guy or gal on campus or in the community, there's no shortcut. I know they're sick of that phrase with me, but there is no shortcut to getting into the Word of God and beginning to listen to God. There is no shortcut. None. Doesn't exist. So the emphasis on the Word is there. The emphasis on being involved with the individual. See, I shared this with somebody last night. I can't keep track of names around here. I'm getting really bad. I think it's senile or whatever.
It'll get worse.
I know. But this has been on my crawl for 4 months. I can't get this out of my mind, as you want me to tell you. In John chapter 9, verse 1, it says, as he passed by. Every time that's said in the gospel, I underline that, highlight them all the time. Because what it communicates to me is Jesus is just walking life. That's what he's doing. That's what you do. That's what all of us do as we're walking life. As he passed by, it says this, he saw a man. The next word's blind. Well, everybody's blind. They just happen to be physical. But everybody's blind in something. It's not the importance of the blind, it's that he saw a man. Do you and I see the individual? And if we can't see what Jesus sees, we're not following Jesus. He saw a man, that's what it says. But then in verse 5, this is where God's really been all over me for 4 months. It says, while I was in the world, comma, I am the light of the world. We all know that verse. Jesus is the only one who can make that statement after the comma. I'm the light of the world. You and I can't say that. But I had to go back to that. And this is what God's been after me for 4 months. While I'm in the world, David, comma, how am I going to fill in the blank? How am I going to fill in the blank? This is my time on the earth. I wasn't born 500 years ago. I wasn't born 1,000. I'm going to be 500 in the future. This is my time on the earth. The Bible says I can have 70 with good health, 80. I know I'm on the back end of this life. I know they're on the back end of their life. I know with everything being equal, I have very little time left. I want to be able to know I'm going to fill in this blank. While I'm in the world, comma, how am I going to fill it in? Gang, I'm telling you, every one of us are going to fill that blank in. Every one of us. The question is, what's going to be written in the blank? Do you know what the most important thing on a tombstone is? I know these guys know. Do you know what the most important thing on a tombstone?
The dash.
The dash. That's all it is. It's the dash. There's a date, born, date, died, dash. That's the most important thing on a tombstone. What happened between those two dates? I look at this and Jesus says, while I was in the world, comma, I'm going to tell you how I'm going to say it, I'm the light of the world. What are you and I going to do in writing in after the comma? Boy, that's been burning in my mind. I want to write in that I was doing what Jesus did. That's what I want to do. Skip Grade, you know what Skip Grade wants on his tombstone? He only wants one thing on his tombstone. He doesn't even want his name. Because Skip Grade wants on his tombstone, John 17:4. I finished the work that you gave me to do. That's all Skip Grade wants on his tombstone. That's it. See, I'm convinced that every one of us are going to fill in the blank. The question is, what is it going to say? I agree with something he says. I know in the community it's worse. They really don't like what he said earlier yesterday. That I can tell you how you're going to finish by what you're doing now. I'm convinced of that. I can sit down with a young guy or a young gal, and if you give me a short amount of time, I can almost guarantee you how you're going to finish by what you're doing now. Again, if you're not sold out now, you're not going to be sold out later. There is solid, absolutely solid research out there that says most people will not change the way they think or the way they behave after age 25. And if you haven't settled some of this before 25, and I hate to say this, but if you're already beyond 25 in here, and you're trying to figure this out, you got a rougher road to hoe. Because you're going to struggle to change what you say, think, or do after 25. Not impossible, but sorry.
I got a question for you about, you mentioned that there's a lot of us, long term, we may change the course of our lives as far as following Jesus goes. What would you say is the most common thing that you've seen over the years that have distracted or have pulled men and women from the faith or have just turned them? Because you have a different perspective than most.
I think they're kind of common. Your girls are teenagers, right?
What's that?
Teenagers, freshmen?
Yeah, 14, 15. I was 14.
Yeah.
Going on 27.
Man, I enjoyed the time with your girls this morning. I still haven't gotten over it. I just loved it. You're good girls, man. You and your wife are doing a great job.
Raise your hand, guys.
There's no doubt about it. The bulk of it falls on the mom. I agree, man. I think you got wonderful girls, man. Some guys are gonna be really lucky one day. Don't say it. Not until you later. That's the proof. Where was I going with that? This is bad.
What is
What'd you
taking
say?
people out?
Oh, yeah.
See some patterns, right?
Hey, I've done this before and turned to someone and say, can you tell me where my glasses are? It's that bad. So, for guys, porn takes out most guys. Who is it?
Green?
No, Jack Deal?
Deal?
Isn't he the one that said that 70% of guys are hooked on porn and the other 30 are lying?
Yeah.
I think he's right. There's other good research. Good research out there says that 80% of men in spiritual leadership positions are hooked on porn. You gotta think about that. 8 out of 10, that's gotta be false. There is just no way the work of God is continuing on if that's true. Scripture said it is. These guys are green, and the other guys, they're good at it. It's true. So without a doubt, that takes it out. What takes out a lot of young guys is a gal. Take that back. It's not the gal. Opposite in the wrong place. It's guys getting involved too early. Guys need to simmer in the faith, in Christ. They need to settle things. Most guys, again, I hate to say stuff like, but good research says that most men don't to reach their maturity until about 29. I told your girls something today. I told them that if they marry a guy early in his 20s, they got to babysit him and they got a good laugh out of it.
Don't ever forget it.
Yeah. Say, I helped you out here.
Yeah, thanks.
You owe me.
I usually up the age.
Okay, all right. So guys early in their 20s getting involved, they're distracted. And a lot of them get taken out because they're distracted. And it's really tough to convince a guy to stay on the course. I tell guys all the time, make sure you're married to develop your first marriage. And the first marriage is Jesus. If you develop your first marriage, you do well in your second. But if you don't develop your first marriage well, you'll probably struggle in your second marriage. So develop your first marriage. So guys need to develop their first marriage consistently over a period of time in their 20s. There are a number of things, the C's, they're still true today. The 4 C's, you guys probably know those, right?
Yeah.
Those are still true. I mean, it's not like anything new under the sun. We do the same thing. They're looking after career, cash, cuties, cars, all that kind of stuff. It's all the same.
So following up on the career piece, that was one I was interested in, is at least in the military context, we watched the responsibility increase in time and focus on the career.
Yeah.
How do you advise guys, like, or how do you see in your own life in terms of, I mean, you've got, what I see happening is in 30s and 40s, everything starts to peak. You got kids that are now teenagers, you got more responsibility in the job, like more hours, more things, everything's kind of at crisis mode in the 30s and 40s. How did you see it in your own life, or how do you advise folks to specifically approach career and manage that margin well? Does that make sense?
It does.
Is it a career choice? Like, are there times where you need to like step back from work, or do you just plow through it, or what does that look like?
No, I have a single phrase with guys, and that's for them not to sell their soul to their job. I said that I increased, when I became an administrator, I had a lot of responsibility as an administrator. I developed 6 different programs with the Galapagos City Schools. I designed them all. And all of them were successful, and I turned around, they just gave me another one, and I designed it. So I just didn't sell my soul to it. And I tell guys all the time, don't sell your soul to it. I think we're supposed to do Mark 7:37, where it says that Jesus has done all things well. I think that's the mark of a person who does full-time job. You're to do what Mark 7:37 says. He did all things well. I hold our guys accountable in the ministry. They do all things well. I'm supposed to be doing all things well. So in the job, I think we're supposed to do all things well. Be a good testimony to Jesus Christ in the way we do. Just don't sell your soul to it. I refuse to sell my soul, even though I was very successful as an administrator and developing different programs. My programs were still named and stated by the governor. Matter of fact, the governor's assistant came to the meeting one time and said, all eyes are on you. You're the only person being able to pull this program off in the state of Ohio. No one else has done it but you. There's 200 people in that room, and they're all trying to get it done. And I got it done in 7 months. It took me 7 months to develop and get a budget for a program that didn't even exist in the state of Ohio. And said, you're the guy. During those 7 months, I didn't sell my soul. I did an excellent job what I was doing, and I did the rest what I'm supposed to be doing. That's love my wife, love my kids, and be involved in the lives of men and women that God has given us. But I refuse to sell my soul.
What's your how do you identify when you're at a decision point to sell your soul? Is it a time thing? Is it a thought process thing? What does that look like?
Both. Time is the crucial one, though. When a guy begins to pour in those 12, 14-hour days,
Yep.
he has sold his soul.
Thank you.
You bet. And I would call any guy on that who does that. So, and because, well, this is my job. Get a different job. Do something different. We're supposed to be involved in kingdom work. However, see, I look at job as ministry, dude. See, I believe in spheres. I try to help guys figure out their spheres. And I do this a lot with spheres. So everybody has their spheres. Well, one is your job. People sometimes who not full-time, who do jobs, feel that the job is just a job and has nothing to do with kingdom work. Well, that's just stupid. I was always doing kingdom work on the job. I prayed with my teachers. I'm going to evaluate them. It was illegal for me to do most of what I did. This is illegal in the state of Ohio, to sit on my desk. It's illegal. It's against the law. My Bible stayed this way on my desk, not just this way, this way. And it always sat between us. So if there's there's my desk, and you had to talk to me through the Bible. So a guy came in there one time and says, I want to know what authority you have to do what you do. I said, this is my authority. He said, you can't do that, it's illegal. I said, no, it's not. He said, it's against the law. I said, this is a higher law. He said, no, that's illegal. I said, no, this is higher law. I said, you asked me, I'm telling you. I didn't ask the question, you did. Okay? So I think those things gotta be, but it is a set of mind. The reason public school is in disarray is God's people have shut up. That's the problem. It's not the school system, it's God's people. God's people should be doing their job. God's people should know that they do kingdom work. I remember one time I was in there sharing the gospel in one of the classrooms, and the aide was in there, and she's over here fidgeting like crazy. So I finished, I walked out, she followed right in behind me, she says, I don't know what to do. I said, what do you mean you don't know what to do? You shared Jesus with that class. I went, yeah. We'll get in trouble. I said, we're not going to get in trouble, don't worry about it. It's fine. She said, well, what if we do? I said, then that's fine too. She couldn't understand that. I mean, I gave an invitation on my football team, and 28 kids and 6 out of 7 cheerleaders said they surrendered to Jesus on the bus. I turned them loose to go in there and tell their parents. The bus driver, she turned to me, she's just absolutely weeping. I said, are you okay? She said, the first boy in front? I said, yes. She asked my grandson. I said, I know. She said, I've been praying for him since the day he was born. My superintendent called me the next day, said, Dave, I really appreciate what you did. One of the cheerleaders is my daughter. We're really rejoicing. We're so glad. But I've also contacted our attorneys, and you need to know, I'm going to give you on record. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your career. I'm going to lose mine. We're going to get sued. Board's going to get sued. Everybody's going to get sued. And we don't have a leg to stand on. I mean, not a leg to stand on. Our attorney says they can't even help us. I said, Jeff, don't worry about it. He said, do you not understand what I'm telling you? I said, yeah, I do. Do you understand? I asked people to start praying on June 1st. They've been praying for this football season. Every day I have prayer orders. They have been laboring for this moment that happened last night. Do you understand that? I do, Dave, and you got to be a little realistic. This is illegal. I said, I know it's illegal. It's okay. Don't worry about it. For the next 6 months, the superintendent's office never got a phone call. Not a single phone call. Criticism or we're in sue. They got nothing but thankfulness over the next 6 months, and nothing ever happened. See, God's people need to step out and trust the God of the universe to do what he does best, and that's call people to himself, not to us. He gives us to be a part of their life. See, God does the heavy lifting. That's what you got to remember. God does the heavy lifting. Now, you and I don't have shoulders broad enough to carry this responsibility, and we just don't. Now, some people may want to communicate that they do, but they really don't either. Even as good as I think he is, the most prolific, one of the most prolific guys in Navigators have ever had in their 90-year history. Yeah, his shoulders aren't that broad enough. But God the Father's is. But he'll entrust us with people over a period of time. That's the cool part about this thing. Pressure's not on us. Pressure's on God, and God can handle the pressure. See, our Father can handle the pressure. So I'm okay with this. So that's probably a long way to answer your question.
No, it answers my question. I guess the next question I have for that then is, so you talk about the spheres and the fact that work is absolutely a ministry.
Yeah.
But then there's also faithful men and women outside of that workplace.
Yes.
And so that's the next question I have for you is how do you balance that as an insider of your work on campus and the guys that are living in your house while still ministering to the football team and being coach, and how do you find that dynamic and balance there?
You won't like my answer. I have a real problem with balance. I think this is a fabric of life. So I don't think of balancing those things. I just think it's a fabric of life. And I try to convince guys and gals that come to our ministry, this either becomes a fabric of your life or it doesn't. That every ounce that you do, the way you think, eat, sleep, talk, is a fabric of life. Of generations and multiplication. So I'm probably the worst person to ask that question to, and I really apologize.
No.
But I just, go man, these guys, they see it, I mean, they know.
Yeah, I have two things. One, I think the two, Seth asked about some principles, And there's the as he was going principle, and there's the with him principle, which is Mark 3:14. So it's the responsibility of the guy doing the training to, as you're going, bring guys with you. So from the beginning, the way Nick has been with me, Dave is your intermittent time is when you do ministry, but it's just a part of Dave and Sandy's life. There's no separation. Everything is spiritual. And I could be biased with this, and I've heard the term like tent making. Like during Nick's tent making, he helped me. I worked with him in the physical therapy office, and now I don't particularly want to work at a daycare in my flesh, but I'm getting training at work because Nick's the director and he helped me work with me. So if you have an opportunity to bring somebody on with you to work a job with you, they get to see you live out Christ's character in the workplace, and that's had an immeasurable impact in my life because I was able to see somebody live out Jesus' character in front of others. So I don't know if that helps much, but that's been my experience, and I think it's been invaluable. There's no separation between ministry and life.
Yeah, I think there's some structured time that's obviously needed where you sit down with somebody and you're, getting time in the Word and teaching them disciplines and things. But what I've experienced most of is Dave's like, hey, I'm going to Walmart. You want to go with me? And there's spiritual conversation on the way. It's there, Evan would ask me in the supermarket sometimes, you are going to talk to 2 people about Jesus before you leave. Okay. And so we would just end up getting this time, that's what training is, and just doing life together. And I think that just makes it more real. You just see it in the everyday places of life, whether it be, there's certain places I can't go with him, whether, there's in the workplace if you're not hired there. But yeah, for the most part, we were actually planning on a vacation in May to go with a bigger group, and we were deciding if we wanted to go to a place that was 6 hours away or a place that was 3 hours away. And we decided, I think, upon the 6 hours away because we wanted to get 3 more hours with them as a captive audience in the car, just to get that intentional. So I think, just rather than trying to, I have to be one-on-one's valuable, man-to-man is extremely valuable, but Jesus was also with all 12 a lot, with the 3, so as long as you're able to meet those needs, I think that... Yeah.
And I like to use a lot so 3 years ago I didn't know any English, and I came to America, I knew water, and just like you guys learning Spanish in school, that's what I learned in Brazil. And I spent 5 months in Spokane, Washington, with a guy. He's a Brazilian doctor, and he said, I'm committed to help you to learn English. And the way he did it was he was going to travel sometimes in an airplane. He's also a pilot. I would go with him or drive to his work. And as we were driving, he was teaching me. And he was, this is a crop, and this is whatever. And then on our way back, we pass again the same place, and he would make sure that I knew those things and that I kind of review them with me. Now, I learned 5 months. I learned more than any time that I had before. I think if now we did have let's learn English this time and this time, but what I really learned was passing through situations where I would never pass if I wasn't with him. And then I could see, how he would speak, what he would say, by the context and everything. And I think that's what, that helped me, to immerse in the culture, helped me to learn English. And that's what I think what Dave and Nick was trying to do with us, with me. If you go to Walmart, we don't have any intention to do anything else. Yeah. But if you see that as, every trip you do is a missionary trip, from here to the store, a lot of things can happen. And I saw a lot of things happening spiritually in those natural, just in a daily life, where I learned a lot how he answered questions, how he asks questions to others, and how he takes the opportunities to do those things. And as he's doing that, I'm being trained and learn. So now, and I think that's one of your questions. He got a lot of things from the military where he put a lot of, there's this order, and that I needed that in my life so much. It was very sporadic, so I need to have this memorize scripture and all of these things that we do.
Pretty structured.
But the structure, yes. But the goal is to put this together in a normal life and be able to live life like that.
I think Josh said it well a while back, and sorry for taking so long. You can obviously feel that we feel passionate about this. Josh said very well a few months ago that if we can only do this on college campuses and military bases, we failed.
That's right.
And so if we can't carry it through our daily life and make disciples, then we're wrong. We failed.
So gang, I would really challenge you to ask yourself, research your heart and mind. Do you believe this is truly a fabric of your life? Or are you just going through the ritual or functional, whatever, doing what you're doing? Because if it's not a fabric of your life, I'm going to tell you, somewhere along the line, you're going to bail out. Even though you may not like to hear that. You just will. It has to be a fabric of your life. I rarely travel alone. I don't care if I'm going 15 minutes from the house, I'm going to find somebody to get in that car with me. I go through a list. I just go through numbers. I'm going to find somebody. I took 6 guys with me down to a place, talked to a guy, wanted to know more about discipleship. And I thought we made, by example, solid communication with this guy. And happened to be during the winter, it was an ice storm. He lost all of his Bradford pears. We just happened to be talking. So what are you going to do? He said, well, I guess we'll go buy a chainsaw. Great. When are you going to do it? This weekend. Who are you taking with you? What do you mean? Who are you taking with you? Well, I'm not taking anyone, Dave. It's just 15 minutes down the road. I can go buy a chainsaw. I'm a grown man. So we were just down there. You don't go jump by that chainsaw by yourself. You go find that guy, go down the list of the guys you know, go take one with you. You get a 15-minute drive with him, you shop around a little bit, 15 minutes back. Now it's not a meeting, it's just life. So we did that. I told him, that was really good. We had a good conversation. Awesome. I said, when are you going to cut your Bradford pears up? He said, oh, probably next weekend. I said, who's doing it with you? Okay, that was good on for it. I cannot ask a guy to come and help me cut my tree. They're my trees. I said, yes, you can. Find one of the guys, come over and cut your trees with you. Feed him lunch, have a conversation with him, and help him serve. Hallmark of Jesus, Mark 10:45. All this stuff with him. Have him do this stuff. This is not complicated. Quit complicating the thing. Go get the guy, drive down, pick him up, bring him to your house, cut some trees, have some lunch, cut some more trees, teach him how to serve, and have a good time with him. And that way he can do the same thing what he does, what you do. But if you're setting up all these meetings for these guys, I'll guarantee you somewhere along the line they're going to say, take a hike. I'm meeting down.
How often do you eat dinner by yourself?
I don't eat dinner very often by myself. You guys don't. I remember your daughters. I'm going to take this back with me that I'm your daughter. He was saying, because I was asking him about how they ate breakfast. Oh yeah, man, there's people over here eating all the time, and they just went on about this stuff, and they just felt excited. They were excited about doing it. I thought, what an attitude! It's tremendous. I'm going to talk about your daughters for a while. So it'd be kind of cool. So.
Yeah, I recently discovered that I'm an introvert, and there's times that there are rare times we don't have people living with us, and all of my daughters and my sons, if they could talk, they're like, "Daddy, it's so boring around here. Where is everybody at?"
They
I'm
said
exhausted.
that. They said that. Oh,
I got nothing else.
They revealed a weakness in your ministry.
Oh yeah.
I loved it. I asked all. I love this age. There's just so much fun to talk to.
Yeah.
So I want everyone to talk to all 5 of you girls. I asked them the same question. How did they view what was happening in the home, and could they explain it? Could they articulate? So bam, 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 bam. And after it was over, I went, do you know all 5 of you girls used the same word? You used guys. We like having time with the guys. Are there no girls? And went, no, there's no girls around here. We like to have some girls. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was tremendous that they saw that.
Yeah.
But it was all, it's not weakness, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
This guy, so I said,
Well, it is for some people.
Oh, I know it is.
The guys are like, why are there no girls?
it is. I thought that was a good insight on the girls'
It's on
part.
purpose because it's lordship.
Yeah, it is. So I would like to do something just for a second though, because I respect him so much. It's almost sick. But I also know he has strong views on certain things, and I would just like to ask Cecil, for your sake as well as my own. He could sit there and go opposite with me tonight, and I would still respect it. That's how much I respect him, and I would think to it. But I'd just like to ask him what his thoughts on the full time, and then just what he thinks about it. He's been doing this a long time. He's been around a lot of men who have gone this route, and others have not, and those seem to work to some extent.
You talking about you personally, or just in general?
Yeah, because I'm not afraid of what he has to say. Yeah, because he and I've gone around multiple times, boxing matches. So, and I value what he has to say, even if it would be critical. But I want him to be honest at the same time. I do, for your sake, and I'm willing to do that. So, what are your thoughts?
I'll make this brief. I was sitting with some West Pointers at the last conference, and I was trying to make a point with them, and I said that the objective of West Point is for the sake of the Army. And if you get lost in just developing West Pointers, you've missed the mark. You're to help keep the esprit de corps, the quality. That's your objective. I think the full-timers, we can't get lost in becoming full-time. We've got to get lost in developing healthiness within the body.
Yeah.
And that's where I think you've probably modeled and communicated very clearly. So there was a time I had this topsy-turvy, and I think I've got it back right now, that the full-time is a means to an end. So, and we shouldn't be thinking full-time unless God just kind of forces us out of the box, either through our own desire or we've just got too much fruit to handle. So that's my take on full-time.
That's my life verse. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I almost
Heard about
thought
that
of how I
yesterday.
could kick that and put it in a Sequoia before I got out of here. I thought about it, I'm gonna be honest, but I had to confess it, so I had to let it go.
People catch you on the way out.
That's it.
She'll tackle you.
Well, I thought about taking the one up in the bedroom too, but I was sitting in Heidelberg, Germany. I was at the Heidelberg Castle looking down the Rhine River. It was on Christmas Eve, 1978. And I was having my quiet time. I happened to be in that chapter. And there is no audible voice, so I don't go there. But I felt a pressing upon my heart that it was so weighty I couldn't hardly see straight. And I thought, surely this is not what you want me as my life verse. So I spent the next probably half hour literally arguing with God. I spent the next 2 months doing the same thing. There is no way you're going to make this happen. It wouldn't be until I went to Israel in 2018 with the beans that I saw that tent. I'd always seen pictures of it, read about it, I know a lot about the tent, but I'd never seen it until we went to Aria. Remember the tent Aria is? That's that tent. So when you look at that tent, it says enlarge the place of your tent. Enlarge. I wonder how large something's supposed to be. Every one of us has to determine what that largeness is. God basically is the one who determines it. It talks about, you're supposed to lengthen your cords and strengthen your pegs. You're supposed to really go down deep and make sure. But that type of tent is done in panels. So sometimes a person's tent can be a large tent. You just add more panels. Sometimes that tent's got to be pulled back, so you just take the cords out, take the panel off, reconnect it, and drag the peg. Now it's a smaller tent. But it's a tent. The size of the tent is actually irrelevant. It's a tent. And are you and I willing to stretch those cords out and bury those pegs? Because the promise is in verse 3. Your descendants will possess nations, and they will resettle desolate cities. I argued, absolutely argued with God about this, going, there's no way that can happen. And I finally settled it, and I said, okay, I don't know how you're going to do it. I don't know why you want this in my life first, but I'll do it. And guess where I landed up for the last 40 years? At a university where kids come in and go out all over. I couldn't see that in 1978. I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it when I was in college. I didn't see it shortly after college. It wouldn't be as the years went by and God would raise up men and women, and He'd begin to send them to China. They'd go over in Japan. They're down in South America. They're over in Africa. They're all over the United States. They're just everywhere. But I couldn't see that. But God could. See, my Heavenly Father knew. And I trust in my Father. Vehemently. I'll send this one last one, and because I know we're way over. But I just, no, I don't take long, no. This one I believe in God. When God says, I will, I think you should mark in your Bible every time God says, I will. Every time. Mark it. I do mine. I have for years. Because when God says, I will, God means I will. That's what it means. All He's looking for is a man or a woman who will believe Him. When He says, I will, I challenge you. Find every I will. And then trust in the God of the universe to do what He says. I will. He'll raise them up. And He'll give you the men and women that He wants you to have. Just stay in it. Stay in it. I don't want to live life any differently. I want to live and die this way. I want to live and die this way. I hope that God allows me to have breath to do this right up to the end. He may not, but I hope He does.